At the beginning of this century, there were around 4,000 library service points in this country. They're part of our heritage, but they're not necessarily what we would replicate if we were to start counting the libraries in the 21st century. Many date back a very long way. They don't all fully reflect the way we live, work, study, travel, communicate, or download information. The history of our libraries has been one of moving away from book and newspaper collections the public can access if they want to, for those who wish to use them, in the words of the 1964, to building services around people and how they access information and what they do with it. And that comes more and more into focus with the impact of digital technology on our everyday lives. The irony of protesting about library closures is that in defending the status quo, we are creating obstacles to the reinvention of the library service. That energy, in my view, is better expended in campaigning for a wider vision of what a library is and could be, in being less concerned with defending libraries than ensuring that vision is widely held and widely communicated to decision makers. I can illustrate the dilemma that local authorities find themselves in. This is the interior of the new Central Library in Plymouth. It's very nice, it's very bright, it's very popular, it's very welcoming, and you can see it has links to its maritime history and identity. While Plymouth were opening new libraries, they were also closing libraries. This one. It's what in Yorkshire we would call a brick hen house. And believe it or not, there was public outcry about the closure of this building. And there was a lament in the local press about the passing of an era. And that's true, it is passing. So how are libraries changing, and are there underlying patterns to those changes? The slides I'll show you are taken from some of the more recent news pages of Designing Libraries, an information resource about library design and innovation that now has more than 1,500 pages of content. Much more of that content is now coming from international projects, because much of the direction is being set in Europe and Scandinavia and in Australia and Canada, and we can learn a lot from what is happening there. But first, there are new libraries still being built and libraries being radically redesigned and refurbished. It comes as a surprise to many that on average, one new library or refurbished library is opened every week. Some of them recently opened include the Curve in Slough and the Story House in Chester, which is a combined library and theatre and cinema. You'll notice that a lot of libraries are moving away from library as a name. So we've got the Curve and we've got the Story House, which is created by a Dutch consultant and they used. We have the Word in South Shields, we have several libraries called the Forum. In this part of the world, I've got up on a slide here. This is Nottingham City. This is the plan for Nottingham's Broadmarsh redevelopment in the heart of the retail centre. Around here, Calderdale recently opened. We're underway, I think, with a plan for Sheffield Central Library, and one of my associates is now working on some consultation with users and staff about the future shape of that. The Harrison Preston, which is very famous as a museum and gallery, it's a combined museum and gallery and library, currently being refurbished. Barnsley Central Library, the Lighthouse, an all-glass building is due to open next year, 4-floor glass panel building in the newly created town centre square. This is Doncaster, and that's scheduled for 2020. Glass is getting very popular. This is encased in glass, and we've got a building inside the building. Now this is the old Girls' Grammar School facade. And we have, of course, the word in South Shields. Many other libraries have been extensively and imaginatively redesigned, including Liverpool, Blackpool, and Manchester. This is the Manchester Archives. That is not what we're accustomed to look at or think of when we talk about archives, but this is what technology enables us to do, is to get more public interest and participation through the digitization of our resources, and that's certainly a beautifully designed space. Another emerging trend is the coming together of academic and public library resources. The most famous of these, most well known, is the Hive. And these, unless students are getting much younger, these are school children learning to be students. And it's a whole performance space as well. So we're looking at both academic and public libraries with different sorts of spaces and different types of engagement with the public. The Hive, of course, is quite consciously a joint public and academic library service rather than an academic library sometimes open to the public for some things. Other examples include the Colindale Library of Barnet, co-located with Barnet and Southgate Colleges, the Forum, Southend, a joint venture between Southend Borough Council and the University of Essex and South Essex College, Wick Library in the Highlands, the public library integrated with the local campus. This is the Business and Economics University in Vienna, and this is the Zaha Hadid building, cantilevered library building. It's one of 6 buildings on the campus, and it raises interesting questions about when you create a new campus and you create some very impressive buildings for students, and often with the purpose of attracting revenue and attracting overseas students. When you plonk this down in the city, the citizens are going to say, what's this all about, and what's in it for me? This has been built right next to the Prater, which is the famous fun fair in Vienna with the big wheel. And they do answer that question by opening it up to the public. And in summer holidays, they invite children in to become temporary students at the university and discover science. And at the end of the academic year, they open the whole thing up to the public. It's Claire there, because she came here to get some water. So please, can someone get me some water for that? I seem to be drying it up here. So if you think what we're looking at is something of an optical illusion created by the camera angle, you'd be mistaken. That building actually does leak. And if you think when you get inside, it will all straighten up, you'd be mistaken again. Thanks very much. The students run up and down these staircases, they're nearly 6 floors. The sides of the staircase lean. I don't know if you've ever done Levada walking, where you've got 2 feet to walk in and a cliffside that comes over your head and a drop on the other side. This is very similar. The wall comes out over your head, the other wall goes there, and there's the stairs, which are an angle, They are level, but they don't feel level. And I went with the rounds with several people, and we all started to feel a little bit seasick. One of the staff told me when she goes to sleep at night, she has to hold on to the side of the bed to stop swaying. So this is like, you know, you can't say it's exactly a folly, because this is how I did, you know, I like to say that sort of thing, but you know, it's the architecture and the aesthetics have perhaps been overdone at the expense of functionality. I think there are 1,500 study spaces, but they're running out of space, and you can't find anywhere flat to put them. This is the De Crook Library in Ghent in Belgium. It's a public library. But it's different. You can see a fair amount of mysterious technology around there. And it looks, this must be a bicycle race, and all the stats and the performance is all being monitored, and it's probably all being filmed as well. And no doubt the kids can get involved in the filmmaking as well. But interestingly, I read a statement they made. If there's one thing unique about this new library, it's that it's a library of partnerships, which makes it so much more than a house of books. For example, De Crook will be Ghent University's research showcase. The idea is to show visitors how the future is shaping up. De Crook can then act as an interactive laboratory. Everyone is free to participate. But above all, in the public library sector, the outstanding trend is the move to what again is called community hubs or service hubs. Carol Stump, who's the chief here in Kirklees, has proposed to redesign library provision across the borough by focusing on their wider community function. And I quote something she said here. This could mean libraries acting as hubs for a range of services, such as the voluntary and community sector, primary care, adult and children's social care, and communities teams, as well as access to networked libraries elsewhere. That for me is a pretty good summary of how many library authorities are thinking about the future of their libraries. This picture is the Chelmsford Families Hub. Since the opening of which, you will probably be aware Essex County facing a lot of difficulties in keeping their libraries open, but at the same time seeing the coming together in nice prestigious buildings of the whole health and children's care agenda. This is Great Sankey hub in Warrington, and this is the first totally dementia-friendly public building in the country, we believe. It's been very carefully thought through, from the parking to the signage to the mats on the floor and the signage and how you find your way about. What's interesting from a library perspective is that this is the leisure centre primarily, swimming pool and sports facilities. And it's open from very early in the morning before people go to work till late into the evening. And the library isn't a separate unit in there, it's distributed throughout. This means when kids come to play football, they walk past the books. People come for one purpose and they discover the library as they go through. We also have libraries as third place, as cultural centres, as creative spaces emerging in Europe. Third place being when you're not at work or school and you're not at home, it's the social space you automatically go to. So a major trend in recent library design across the sectors has been the reinvention of libraries as community spaces, creative spaces, often described as a place to meet, learn and read, And the Crook Library describes itself as a place to read, to learn, to live, and simply to be. Perth, Australia described the library as the city's lounge room, space for the people to meet, learn, create, and engage. There's Thionville Library and Media Centre in northeastern France. France tends to call its libraries mediathèques, has the ambition to become the new model for media libraries as a third place for the public, a collective living room. I've got other pictures of this with people cycling. This is the amazing Stovner Library in the suburb of Oslo. Totally different approach to library ambience, what it feels like, what you do in it. And I think it's helping to define the shape of things to come, as I think is the word in South Street, which we'll hear more about shortly. And the project brief was to ask, what should a library for the 21st century look like? What should it offer to the public? The various answers to that question will shape and change libraries over the next decade. This is Victoria, also in Oslo, in a suburb with a lot of social problems, a large immigrant population, and quite a few youth problems. And this is a library created solely for young people, and no adults are allowed in there. And you can see there are all sorts of activities possible in there, as well as reading. There's plenty of games. You can even learn to cook. And this interior was not designed by a traditional library designer, but by a group of people who specialise in theatre set design. So this is library, as it were, as theatre. But in talking about library buildings and spaces, we have to confront the impact of new technology. A library is more than a building. We all tend to use the word digital lightly to cover all sorts of emerging technologies. Essentially, of course, it's about digitised content as opposed to print. When I was briefly the marketing manager for a digital content aggregator, one of the key selling points was that 80% of library use in this particular Canadian university library happened outside the library building. Some students never set foot in the library. Then as now, a lot of students didn't even know the information they had access to came from the library. So an immediate consequence of the move to digital has been the question, so what is the library building for? The answer has been in the repurposing of traditional library spaces into learning centres and collaborative spaces, with more emphasis on interaction and less on library materials. That, I think, is coming around in the circle to a demand for more private and silent study space, and a refocusing in research libraries in particular on the uniqueness and value of collections. So you've been hearing a lot today already about flexibility and the flexible use of spaces, and that is very certainly a trend in the academic sector. As new technologies come on stream, that question never goes away. To enumerate some of these digital challenges, we have enormous changes in the way we communicate with each other and with users, smart devices, apps, chatbots, voice activation, data creation and data visualization, interactive content display, virtual reality, augmented reality. Think of the impact of some of these on museums, archives and art galleries, and the changing user experience, from museums as scholarly resources to user engagement and participation. Data visualization, I think, is one of those things we have yet to fully address. We are swamped by data, not just information, but raw data, and picking out useful patterns of that and communicating that in a useful and visual way is a challenge. This is Pulse. It's the Twitter wall at the Museum of London. It's a geotagged real-time analysis of tweets in London, what people are talking about, minute by minute. It's fairly mind-boggling, to be at least, that we can do such things. We have to think about what are the applications of this. Can we do real-time flood predictions, for example? All sorts of data available to us. How do we get it? How do we handle it? How do we represent it? How all these developments will fit into the public and academic library offer is evolving. We see in particular now momentum in maker spaces in libraries, robotics, programming, crafts, music, film editing. For me, there are two questions we should be asking ourselves in shaping the digital technology-driven library offer. First, what is the opportunity? How does the technology serve our aims, benefit our users, enhance the user experience, or offer something unique? Secondly, what does that mean for library spaces? Are we actually making the library redundant by making the user more independent, less dependent on the library itself and on library staff? Is that good or bad? How will the technology determine the use of space for both learning and teaching? Who will be using it and what for? How do we create a seamless library that is both a physical space and an online space in which the user, in each case, is fully immersed? There are no simple answers to these questions, but exploring them is quite an interesting adventure. This is one of the maker spaces. I think this is in Dock 1 in Denmark. Interestingly, I learned recently about a county library authority introducing maker spaces for the first time in the library, and said, this is one of the riskiest things you've ever done. It struck me as really strange because up to then, no one thought it very risky to lend someone a book about how to do something, how something works. So moving to the next stage and it's coming along and saying, well, come and find out and come and do it. Doesn't seem all that risky to me. It seems something absolutely core to the library and information world. So there's this 3D printing also top one, I think. And you can see in the background, it's part of a much larger exhibition of what the library service offers and some of the technology available. This is Calgary's Idea Lab. The Calgary Library just opened a few days ago, and this was the Idea Lab in the old library. Because they did long-term consultation with people, not just consultation about what you would like, but totally engaging people in trying out things and then fixing them. So business startups, for example, coming along and saying, what could we do for you? This used to be the staff room. But the staff could only go in there if they had a good idea to share. And a trend in Europe particularly is the open participation in debate and discourse. Something we don't do a lot of in the UK, because traditionally local authorities are very nervous about critical discussions and politicised discussions. But in Scandinavia, it's just what you do. There are public meetings going on all the time. It's like Calgary and Dock 1 would have over 1,000 partnership programs running each year. And it's also a performance space. So we've seen a lot of people in some of these slides, and we've seen quite a bit of technology. I haven't seen a whole heap of books, but that doesn't mean books are disappearing by any means. They're still core and always will be core to the library ourselves. So I hope that's a little bit useful. Which one of these works? Does this work? Oh, yes. So I just wanted to show you the Designing Libraries website. Because if you're not familiar with it, you will find it very, very useful. It supplements and complements everything we've been talking about today, and has, as I said, 1,500 pages of resources on there. On the left-hand side is a list of our sponsors, which is the only way we get any money. It's a community interest company, and so it's for you. It's not for profit. Some news items on the front page here. The Luxembourg Learning Centre is a brilliant thing to look at. And there is more information links from that. We have library projects. Designing Libraries started off as a government-funded database with the intention of improving the way buildings were, improving the building stock by showing examples of good practice. To find anything on here, you have to do some filters. But I've just taken Teesside record, so I can show you that. This is new. So that's, you'll be hearing about that. So there's a description about the buildings and the space, and the links and that. Loads of case studies, huge number of resources in there. So planning and designing the academic library, you find the links to the websites and two books and articles in there, plenty of stuff there. And feature libraries are interesting. So some of the major libraries which I've been talking about are there in full, including the world. We have the video gallery. And I would, the most interesting ones I found recently is the Relax Learning Centre in Lausanne. Oh, you can hear this. Just a couple of minutes of this because I think the interview with the architect is really interesting.
EPFL is an ambitious institute of technology. It wants to become one of the best institutes of technology in the world. For this, it also needed to have a flagship. And the Learning Centre answers exactly this ambition. We were looking for worldwide architects, and we had a competition. Some of the best architects, in fact, 5 Pritzker Awards. But this building started with something very special to us.
When the competition started, they said the space was open to everybody. It's not only students, but also the public people. We somehow image like a park. The space for the chance to start communicating.
自分が滞在する場所を選んだり、仕事をしたり、語り合ったりということが積極的に誘発されるような場所というのを考えたので考えました。
We wanted to have an area which is conducive to learning. You cannot learn in any kind of environment. This building will be open from 7 o'clock in the morning to midnight every day. We want to have this learning center dedicated to our students, where they can not only study but live.
You know, go home and watch that in full. That's interesting. But it's the way they break down barriers with students in different faculties, and the same thing happens in Vienna. When you go to the learning centre and library, you meet and you cross-fertilise. So if you're not already signed up for the newsletter, do that on the homepage. You can just already newspage, sign up there, and that'll keep you in touch once a month with eSource exists for your benefit. So thanks very much for letting me do that.